Hello and welcome to this final seminar of the FAME final event. I will just give a few more minutes for some colleagues to join to this, not colleagues, but to participants to join this session. Just let's wait 30 seconds and we will start. All right, so a warm welcome to you all. My name is Erik Svanberg, representing Chalmers University. In this session, I also have my colleagues and experts, Jovana Karasanovic of Austria Tech, Carlos Johan, and Justin Hidalgo Vélez from IDIADA to present the details. So on this session, there is a possibility to ask questions, and you can do so by using the Q&A button in the Teams call. Please share your questions there, and we can also, once the presentations are finalized, you can also raise your hand, and we can ask your question if you have any. So let's start. I will just have a brief overview of the FAME project, as maybe not all of you were represented this morning when we had the overview. The FAME project started in 2022 with 4 million euros in funding for 22 project partners. So FAME is really building on this large stakeholder network and that has served as a key component for input and also dissemination. The project has co-organized the UCAD conferences and also stakeholder workshops and initiated the policy dialogue. The link to the CCAM Partnership is of course super important and well established on an overall level, but also with key persons having cluster leader positions in CCAM as well as being participants in the FAME project. In this session, we will present the regulatory frameworks and the inventory and recommendations for that, where the CCAM State Representatives Group has assisted the project on providing input on the current legislation in the respective country. In addition, we have the EU, US, Japan knowledge exchange, which is of course important, however lacking the support from the US since a few years back. The stakeholder engagement is important from the European Commission, from the industry, from academia and society. And to the right, down to the right, we have this morning, we had Vasilis Sorlas from ICCS presenting the EU-wide knowledge base, which is the knowledge hub for CCAM research and innovation in Europe. All material related to the framework that we will present in this session are published in the knowledge base, but also an impressive list of projects, test size, test corridors, standards, news and events. In this session, I will present what is then down to the left. It's the European framework for testing on public roads. Based on lessons learned in past and European national projects and activities, we have defined the framework with components covering the multidisciplinary aspects of testing automated vehicles on public roads. In all parts, we're trying to develop these components together with the experts from all over Europe within the CCAM domain. I know that many of you are present in this call, and I would like to thank you all for contributing to this project with your great expertise. We have organized these different aspects as pillars with different components. These component types can be inventories, best practices, but also recommendation, templates, or tools. A common vocabulary is important, and defining a glossary is something that more or less every project usually starts off with. The CCAM taxonomy presents an approach to logically organized terms and definitions that can be used by other CCAM projects. It's easy to make an export of these definitions to be used in your project, and you can also suggest additions or modifications. The tool is available through the Connected Automated Driving Knowledge Base. Then, from the left pillar, we have the regulatory aspects. ethical considerations, we have the data management topics, including test data space, and to the right, we have the common evaluation methodology. We see all these pillars as and components as vital for any CCAM testing activity. The European Common Evaluation Methodology is a material that can be used by CCAM projects and experts with the aim to harmonize research results from the projects. The material is extensive with 200 plus dense pages, but there are also simplified versions that can be used as introductions to this material. And as well, this is also available on the Connected Automated Driving knowledge base. In the previous session, just before this, we deep dived into the CCAM data sharing framework and test data space. The material and tool aims at simplifying data exchange in the CCAM domain. And again, all this material is available on the knowledge base. But for now, I will hand over to my colleague and expert Jovana Karahasanovic of Austriatech, presenting the inventory and regulatory frameworks in Europe. Jovana, please.
Thank you very much, Eric. I will take over presentation. And good afternoon to everyone. My name is Jovana Karahasanovic from Austriatech, and I will give you a short overview of the analysis we conducted, which is the basis for the development of the recommendations for a harmonized European framework for testing automated vehicles on public roads, which my colleague will present in the next presentation. So, what is the background? In Europe, we were and still are facing the challenge that we have no harmonized AV testing regulations in the different countries, and especially large-scale demonstrations projects struggle with the different national regulations and procedures when they want to conduct cross-border tests. And that is why, in a first step, as a basis for developing the recommendations, we conducted an analysis of CCAM testing procedures and administrative frameworks across the countries. We investigated the different approaches, commonalities, and peculiarities between countries, and analyzed also the transition from the recent developments in the area of testing to real-life operations. We gathered all that information by using a data collection sheet that we developed, elaborated, and that we sent to all the participating countries, asking for their national testing framework, the test application permission processes, which entities are involved in the process in the different countries, but also regarding the monitoring process and reporting regulations, their data requirements, how they handle data, and how the testing organizations need to handle data. And also we consider their ethical, technical, and organizational aspects. And finally, we also asked for potential cross-border activities there. I want to highlight that we conducted this data collection in 2023 with a final update loop in early 2024. So in the meantime, there probably have been some developments that we couldn't consider anymore in our deliverable, but I can already tell you that we will follow up on this topic in the follow-up project, CCAM Ambassador, and the respective information on national regulations will also be updated on the knowledge base during the CCAM Ambassador project. We had 30 countries participating in our analysis, covering all 27 European member states. And in addition, we had also Norway, Switzerland, and the UK answering our questions. The analysis showed that of these 30 countries, 22 have a legislative basis for AV testing on public roads. And those can be split into countries with national legislation dedicated to AV testing below the individual, let's say, categories. You can see the countries. Then we have those countries enabling AV testing. Why is it going on with a national countries enabling AV testing based on already existing national acts, and finally countries having guidelines or a code of practice as a basis for allowing these tests. This means also that 8 countries have no legislative basis for AV testing yet, but I also learned that some have already advanced developments in this area, and we are sure that in the next project we will be able to give some updates here. We looked a little bit deeper and we identified a common thread running through these regulations when it comes to having a safety operator in the vehicle. We have 16 of these 22 countries requiring a safety operator at any time during tests on public roads. And across all countries, having a human in the loop to take control of the vehicle when necessary is seen as a fundamental safeguard to ensure public safety. Then again, we also have 5 countries saying that in some cases, a safety operator does not necessarily need to be inside of the vehicle, but could, for example, also be close to it, or even remote operation would be allowed in some countries. The countries with which are requiring a safety operator under certain circumstances are listed at the right side. One, from our point of view, also interesting result was that 4 of the analyzed countries indicated that they are accepting test permissions of other countries, which means that there is a cross-border acceptance of test permissions. These countries are Finland, Luxembourg, and Norway and Spain. Why is this important? Because it's an important step towards barrier-free cross-border testing, and consequently the introduction into a harmonized automated mobility landscape. And many, many more results can be found in the respective deliverable of the project. The link, I guess, will be shared with the presentation at the end of this event. And at this point, I want to thank all of the contributors and especially also the task partners who did a great job. And now I'm handing over to Carlos Lujan from IDIADA, who will continue with the presentation of the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Giovanna. Thank you, Eric, for the previous introductions. And well, I will start from the point where Giovanna ended her presentation, which is the conclusions of their analysis of the existing regulatory framework in the different European countries at that moment, which has been the input we have been using in order to carry out our work in this project, which has been the development of a series of recommendations for this regulatory framework on the use or on the allowance of testing of automated driving vehicles on the open roads. This is a task that has been there it is. That has been carried out, even if you can see my name in the screen, Carlos Lujan, the head of homologation for connected and automated vehicles at IDIADA. I have been working together with an amazing team of people, including Justin, Pablo, Soraya, and so many others that have been doing an amazing work. And here today, I will introduce you some of the topics that we have been taking into consideration for the creation of these recommendations, and also some overview about the conclusions that we reached. First of all, and most important, it's to understand why we are here and why we have been working on this topic. And at the end, the main goal we had is to be able to deploy automated driving vehicles in the open road. But in order to reach that point, there are a series of actions that need to take place beforehand. There is need for a series of tools that need to be used before reaching this final goal of the deployment of the automated vehicles in the open road. The previous stage requires national legislation for the use, for the deployment of these vehicles in the open road, plus the vehicle technology being validated by means of the type approval. Before reaching this point, in order to get the type approval, we need to go through the type approval process, which is currently in the European Union ruled by these new assessment and testing methodologies that are being used by the different regulations in place. And this new assessment and testing methodology consists on a combination of different testing and assessment methodologies, which include the safety assessment or the audit of the processes of the manufacturer, include the testing of the vehicles in the test track, and especially with regards to this project, it also includes some open road testing that need to take place in order to grant the approval to the vehicle. In order to do so, we also need some tools that allow us as a technical service to test those vehicles in the open road even before their type approval. But even before that, the manufacturers need to prove or need to validate that their technologies are compliant and with their requirements. They need also to drive those vehicles in the open road in order to develop the technology. So it's very important as well to have the possibility of testing those vehicles in the open road before the homologation takes place. If we focus in the first set of national requirements, in the first set of national legislations for testing automated driving vehicles in the open road, we see that those two blocks, the open road testing for type approval and the open road testing for validation and development, can be put together in the same box, even if in some countries there may be some differences, but we consider that they have quite a lot of synergies and that we could evaluate or we could take both of them into account jointly. And we see that there is a long list of requirements as part of this national legislation based on the input that we got from Austria Tech and from the previous deliverable. Some of those requirements included insurance, included the registration of the vehicle with regards to license plates, to some administrative topics. But what we wanted to focus in is on this authorization for testing, which is the main target of this project. So we have been closely working in this activity with some relevant stakeholders of the automated driving vehicle ecosystem, because at the end, as I mentioned before, what we have been developing here are just tools in order to reach the final goal. And these tools need to be used by someone. So we have been involving all or most of the users of these tools so that we could receive a relevant feedback that could help us develop some practical solutions. Some of the partners or some of the stakeholders that have been involved in this project include, of course, the European Commission, in which we have been working very closely together by means of this homologation testing subgroup from the Motor Vehicle Working Group that has had a lot of synergies with our project. With DGT, the Spanish Directorate for Traffic, who is one of the organizations or one of the authorities that has published a very widely accepted regulation for testing vehicles on the open road that has been used as a reference also in other countries and also by other European funded projects as a very complete regulation. Also with the CCAM Partnership, of course. With the High Drive project, we have been working together in order to take advantage of the cooperation between both projects. Also with some of the manufacturers or some of the service providers of these technologies, and of course as well with the regulators. So we have been analyzing the information coming from previous deliverables. We have been sharing the information with external stakeholders, and finally putting together all of this information and trying to get the best of all of the inputs that we have been receiving. The first topic that I want to address is with regards to the safety validator, and now we are already entering in the recommendations. One of the first aspects that we considered that was relevant to be analyzed is the role of the safety validator and who could be the safety validator. we analyzed the different regulatory frameworks, the existing regulatory frameworks, and we saw that there were different options going from the self-assessment of the applicant, authority being the responsible for the safety validation, or the use of a technical service or an external partner for the safety validation. At the end, this is something that we didn't want to define a single option or a single recommendation for that, because it depends on several factors. And at the end, this is the authority who will take or will assume the responsibility on how to design or how to appoint this safety validator. But we introduced some of the factors that should be taken into account by this authority in order to decide who could be the safety validator in each case. Some of those factors included the activity to be validated, the complexity of this activity, the environment in which this activity would take place, as well as the technical capabilities of each safety validator. In some cases, the authority itself may not have the technical knowledge or the technical resources in order to carry out the safety validation, so they could externalize this activity to an external technical service, for example. Another aspect that we consider quite relevant is the role of the safety operator. And in that case, it's very important to emphasize what the safety operator is, because we don't need to mix things up and we don't need to confuse. We cannot confuse the role of the safety operator with the role of the operator as defined in the type approval regulations. We need to understand that type approval regulations define vehicles that have already been validated by authorities, vehicles that can be deployed with no need for supervision. So the role of the operator here is just in case of emergency, it's just in order to activate, deactivate, or reinitialize the automated driving system, or in the case in which a minimum risk maneuver is requested, it can be done directly by the operator of the vehicle. But when it comes into testing, the role of the safety operator needs to be quite wider, and the amount of responsibilities in the hands of the safety operator are also wider. They may include this object and event detection and response. So the safety operator needs to supervise the activity of the automated driving vehicle, but also in some cases it may also take full control of the dynamic driving tasks in the cases in which the vehicle is not able to do it by itself. At the end, we can summarize the role or the responsibilities of this safety operator as a person that will always be accountable for driving. So this person will be responsible for anything that happens to the test pilot. Also shall be able to take full control of the vehicle at all times, if required. It shall be, or he or she shall be trained enough to perform the testing activities, and shall be in possession of the driving license for the vehicle and the jurisdiction. So it shall be a person that is able to control the vehicle at all times. Moving into the next topic, which is with regards to the flow chart, to the process itself, what we have been trying to do is defining a very flexible approach. And this is something which we have seen it's absolutely necessary, because we wanted to have a wide regulatory framework. We wanted to have a proposal that could be valid for different use cases, but we have seen that we cannot put all of the use cases into the same procedure. So we need some flexibility that takes into account the differences between the different use cases that we may encounter. So we defined a procedure which is carried out into stages. The first stage, which is based on submission of documents, which will be analyzed by the safety validator. And depending on the results of this analysis, depending on the risk assessment, there may be two different conclusions. The first one being that the risk is acceptable, but that there is a need for additional evidences, or that the analysis is enough. And in the case in which the analysis is enough, we can also find two different solutions. The first one being that the risk is acceptable to start testing, and in that case, we will move into the physical testing after inspecting the vehicles and ensuring that the vehicles that will be placed into the open road are representative of the documentation that has been shared. Or alternatively, if the results of the risk assessment are that there is too much risk and that there is a need for additional evidences, we will move into the second submission stage that we will see later. When it comes into the documents that will be submitted in this first stage, we find, first of all, the description of the testing activity. So what will be done, which vehicles are going to be tested, in which conditions, where. Also, the description of the vehicle, of course, the description of the system, including the version of the software, the description of the system, the ODD, a certain declaration of compliance with regards to cybersecurity. We are not aiming at a full cybersecurity analysis, especially when it comes into early prototypes where it may be impossible. And also, and very important, the system risk evaluation, which will be the basis for the analysis of the safety validator in order to understand if there is need for a second stage or if the project can go ahead with no further verifications. In terms of cybersecurity, as I mentioned before, we are not aiming at the same level of compliance that we may ask for in a type approval, in a homologation, as defined in Regulation 155, because we understand that we are testing early prototypes or prototypes which are in the late stage of development, but which are still not for production. So we have done this reduction of the scope, same as we have done with other requirements, in which we have aligned the requirements or we have adapted the requirements to the actual level of compliance that can be demonstrated by the technology that will be placed in the road. In the case in which the safety validator asks for additional evidences, as we mentioned before, well, we can include these are some examples that you can see in the list, like, for example, the modifications that have been done to the base vehicle or the specific road events that the function will not be able to respond to at the end. This is responsibility of the safety validator, and this is quite in line with my initial comments about the safety validator. Safety validator needs to have a certain technical background in order to be able to identify which challenges or which gaps are present from the documentation submitted by the applicant in order to be able to ensure that the safety is guaranteed by the vehicles. Okay, so if we move into the second submission stage, this is a consequence of a too high level of risk assessment in which additional actions are required or additional evidences are required by the safety validator to the applicant. In that case, again, as in the previous case, the applicant will provide evidences, will provide documents. Some of those documents, in this case, may be based on preliminary testing in closed environments, like testing in the proving ground. So the complexity of the evidences required for the second stage is higher than the complexity in the first stage. But here we don't need to forget that we are talking about vehicles in which the risk assessment, or we are talking about pilots in which the risk assessment provided a high level of risk. So that's why we are asking for a higher level of evidence. In that case, again, if the level of risk after this second stage is considered to be under control, then we can move into the testing phase. One of the proofs or one of the evidences that we have considered in this second level of assessment is some testing, as I mentioned before, some testing under controlled circumstances in a proving ground, for example. And we also wanted to make this testing as flexible as possible. As I said before, this framework wants to be able to cover as many realities as possible. So we have included here the two extreme cases, the case in which the base vehicle is homologated and it's just modified by the applicant. In that case, the safety validator will not require testing on those features of the vehicle that are already demonstrated by the type approval. that are still under the responsibility of the first stage vehicle, but will only focus in those autonomous driving tests that are a consequence of the modification of the vehicle. In the other case, in the other extreme of the use cases, we can find the non-homologated or fully custom prototype, in which not only the autonomous driving tests are required, but also some manual driving tests. Of course, there may be a lot of intermediate cases in which the test protocol need to be adapted in order to be valid for the reality of that vehicle. And this is something that we are considering in these recommendations. Here you can see the list of some of the recommended tests. Of course, this is just a recommendation, and as I said before, it needs to be adapted to each case. Also, some requirements for the data logger in the case in which the second stage submission is necessary. If the authority thinks or considers that they will need some information to come from the vehicle in order to ensure that the vehicle is safe enough and that they can analyze it afterwards, then we have included some requirements that have been inspired or that come from the existing regulations for type approval, but of course simplified to take into account that we are talking about prototypes. So we have taken information from Regulation 160 on EDR, Regulation 157, the specific section for the data storage system for automated driving, or the same from the regulation on automated driving systems from the European Union. Here you can see the list of the data elements that we are considering. At the end, we have simplified that list quite a lot, and we are just focusing on identifying and being able to record those events that may be useful in order to understand the causes of an accident, if it happens, or of an incident, so that the authority can analyze the reasons or can ask for additional requirements to be met by the applicant, or so that the applicant can also make use of this information in order to improve the robustness or the safety of the pilot. Additionally to the data elements that we have considered, there are some requirements of these data recorders with regards to the data availability during the power loss or in case of accident or collision. But well, it's quite in line, as I mentioned before, with the requirement of the regulation. Another important topic is the possibility of using a remote safety operator, or better said, the possibility of using exclusively a remote safety operator with no backup inside of the vehicle. This is something that was raised by different stakeholders during the discussions, the possibility of using only remote safety operators that would be able to act on the vehicle to perform this role of the safety operator, but with no need of being inside of the vehicle. And we have been analyzing different use cases where this already happens, and we have tried to take the best of those use cases. At the end, what we have defined in our recommendations is a list of best practices, including staff attention and rest periods, health, fitness, and vetting of the operators, ergonomic workstation layout, but also some requirements related to incident protocols, adequacy of the communication network, connectivity, the possible or which can be the role of the remote operator in the case of a minimum risk maneuver, and some other requirements that we have introduced as mandatory requirements in our set of recommendations. Another relevant topic when we are talking about testing is the traceability of the software. We acknowledge that vehicles are placed in the road in order to develop the technology, to prove the technology, and that as a result of these tests, the conclusion may be that for the manufacturer or for the applicant, that they need to modify something, to recalibrate something, to update the software. So this will be something that will be will happen quite often during this test. So we defined also a process for evaluating this traceability of the software, because at the end of the day, the authority that has granted the permission has granted the permission for a certain vehicle using a certain software version. So We have identified two different options. The first one, those updates that do not affect functional and operational safety. In that case, just the applicant will be responsible for providing explanation of the purpose of the update and self-assessment, internal self-assessment, and declaration of freedom from unreasonable risks, so that the authority is aware that there is a new version of the software, but it does not affect the safety of the vehicle, but there is traceability. And on the other hand, we have the opposite possibility where the software update affects the functional safety. In that case, there needs to be a further assessment, a further evaluation, and in some cases, if it's deemed to be necessary, some additional tests may be required. A very important topic we have introduced in our proposal, and which has also been mentioned by Giovanna before, is this mutual recognition. I think this is a key element, and this is something that most of the stakeholders have required us during the meetings and conversations we've had. At the end, we know that the framework is not harmonized, that each authority is responsible for their national or regional rules, but we wanted to make things easier. So we created this proposal in which the applicant does not apply directly to a certain approval or a certain country, but to an European platform that will manage this application. This application will be submitted to a safety validators group, which is made of different countries, different member states, including one lead country that will be responsible for the main actions on the process, but supported by other countries. This lead country will be responsible for granting the permission to the applicant, to communicating all of them to the European platform, which will share the results to the other countries. As a result of this communication, the other countries may accept the permission granted by the lead country, partially or totally. In the case in which it's totally, there is a mutual recognition. In the case in which it's only partially, it may be limited to a certain ODD or a certain scope of the activity. And just to finalize, I also wanted to highlight the work carried out on the ethical aspects in CCAM testing. There is a full section in the deliverable that will be made public soon, which takes into account or considers the current state of the art and that provides guidance on the ethics in vehicle testing. And this deliverable includes also a proposal for how to deal with the ethical aspects of automated vehicle testing, in which it proposes the appointment of an ethical evaluator for this large-scale test, which will oversee the adherence to the ethical standards using the so-called ethical checklist. This is, again, a recommendation, but we consider it to be useful for these large-scale tests. This ethical checklist I mentioned before is made of 9 key topics, including the ethical decision-making in the algorithms, data privacy, user consent and control, and some others. So with that, I just want to finish with this fresh information about the finalization of the deliverable on this topic. This deliverable will be available in July, and I hope it will be useful for all of you. So thank you very much, and I think it's time for the questions.
Thanks, Carlos, for an excellent presentation of this complex task and part of the project. So it's been really a pleasure working with you at IDIADA and seeing this develop as a nice set of recommendations. So I will look into the Q&A soon. I will just start with one question, and if it's you, Carlos, maybe. So, what has been the most challenging part in getting the acceptance for these recommendations by the different stakeholders? As you recalled, I recall you had a number of actors, different stakeholders listed. So, what has been challenging or maybe interesting to see in these dialogues?
Okay, I would rather say what has not been challenging, because I think that we have encountered challenges at every step. Now, at the end, as you mentioned, we have been working with a lot of different stakeholders, each stakeholder had their own priorities. We have been working with the industry, and for the industry, it's simplifying a lot. We can say that regulations are a burden and they want a higher flexibility. They want to put the vehicles on the road the sooner the better with no technical or administrative restrictions. For the authorities, they want to be sure that what they are authorizing in the road will not be a safety problem. So our role has been to be in the middle and trying to balance the request from one side with the request from the other, and also taking into account that from the whole list of authorities that we have currently in Europe, not all of them have the same vision and not all of them have the same objective. There are countries where there is industry and they have certain priorities, while other countries where there is no industry have very different priorities. So I think that we have been doing a very important role in terms of putting everything together and trying to make everyone agree, at least on minimums.
Thanks a lot. Maybe if you can support me, because I have some issues with seeing if there are any questions in the Q&A section. If someone can update me on that.
I can see 2 questions. So the first one is, are the national rules remaining on paper, or are there some AV programs on European roads that are putting these rules into practice?
I think I can answer on that if you want. Probably also Giovanna has some information, but yeah, from our experience as a technical service, and we are also recognized by the Spanish Directorate General for Traffic for the validation of the technologies for trying those vehicles in the open road in Spain. We know that there are a lot of trials going on, or I don't know if a lot, but quite of them, at least in Spain. We also know that this happens also in other countries. We have seen permits granted by other authorities. And also in terms of R&D, we know that our colleagues from the High Drive project have been also trying to place their vehicles in the road for testing. So yeah, this is something that is working. Of course, now with a lot of obstacles, a lot of burdens, especially because of this lack of harmonization that requires the manufacturers or the applicants to ask country by country, authority by authority, how to proceed. And in some cases, there may even be some technical differences from a country to country that makes the applicants require them to do some modifications on the vehicle. But this is something that is already ongoing.
There is another one, it is quite long, from Cormac McKay.
Maybe Cormac can ask the question directly.
Yeah, and I mean, in the meantime, I can give him indeed the mic. But in the meantime, I would invite the speakers to read in the Q&A the long comment from Cormac. And Cormac, you should now be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, I can't turn on my video, unfortunately, but I can give an indication of what my question is. So in the US, we didn't really discover what a lot of the issues were until we had a large-scale deployment that we haven't had in Europe yet. We've had a lot of small trials and innovation trials, but we haven't really discovered what the problems are. And what the problems they've discovered with the large-scale deployment in the US is the lack of a live real-time digital twin provided by the local authorities, so that road closures could be avoided or incidents with first responders. And those events have caused quite a severe public perception damage. So how are we going to avoid things like that? And it's mainly an off-vehicle issue. So it's not a question of vehicle regulation, but it's getting the local authorities, the local transport authorities, to adopt these things that would be need for the entire ecosystem. And the priority communications is another one. So that a vehicle will have the priority over cell phones in an area for those priority communications, where also we've seen in the US where a car has just stopped in traffic. And the reason why that has happened is because there's been a communication failure where the remote guidance hasn't been able to operate with the vehicle. And again, that's a public perception damaging event. So I really think we need to concentrate on the local authorities and guide them on what will be needed for a successful large-scale deployment across the EU. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Cormac, for this perspective. I think, at least from the part where I have participated, I've seen quite a big difference in the perception from the authorities and maybe from the industry, where we see that the authorities are looking much into this and these topics, where the industry and are looking more at, of course, the technical solutions to put these vehicles on public roads. So I think this is something that we need to meet somewhere in between there and learn in terms of how to get also the public acceptance to this. I also think that this has been really it's been a lot of attention on this in the CCAM partnership, and it's good that this gets attention as well, because we have seen this from the large-scale demonstrations or large-scale deployments that actually happens in the US right now. So maybe I can leave some room for Carlos or anyone from IDIADA to respond as well to that.
Yeah, sure. For such a long question from Cormac, my answer is very short. Yes, I agree. But let me develop this a little further. If I would not agree with that, we would not have been involved in this project, because what we have done in this project is exactly what you have mentioned. We have focused in the local, regional, national authorities, which currently hold the responsibility for the rules, for the regulations on the permits for testing vehicles in the open road. And at the end, I showed that in my first slide. This is just a first step towards the full-scale deployment of those vehicles, but it's a necessary step. And if we don't put vehicles on the road, if the manufacturers, the applicants, the R&D centers cannot test their technology, they cannot improve their technology, they cannot find the problems, the gaps with their technology, we will not be able to go to the next step. So totally agree with you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the question, and also from Carlos from this response on this. I also think that it's something where we need to look at from the perspectives of scale of these tests. So looking at the very small scale innovation and testing activities, that is a step that needs to be taken. But once we can go to the large scale testing activities, this needs to really be addressed, and we need to have this in place, and that is why we have this flexible approach in this framework. So we need to cover from this very few vehicles to a scale of hundreds or thousands of vehicles, and the framework actually supports that, of course, with the role of the authorities and to require this information. I have maybe one final question that I would like to ask then on this perspective, because you mentioned on the role of the safety validator. So can you just elaborate a bit on what is the kind of who is the safety validator, and how will the safety validator apply this framework for the test permit to be accepted?
Well, at the end of the day, the ultimate responsible for the authorizations, for the permits, is the national authority, that may be depending on the transport ministry, depending on the regional authority, but there will be someone signing the certificates and assuming the responsibility for that. Before that can be completed, before that certificate can be signed, there shall be an evaluation of the safety of the pilot, and it's responsibility of this signing person to appoint someone which will ensure this person sufficient level of trust. No? So at the end, as I mentioned before, it may depend on several factors. It may depend on the complexity of the tests, on the maturity of the technology, on how many the scale of the test, and depending on that, the authority may take one decision or another. But at the end, it's the final responsible and the decision maker on who can be appointed as a safety validator is exclusively on the authority.
All right. Thanks a lot again to Giovanna, to Carlos, to Austria Tech team and the IDIADA team for this excellent work, and also the other organizations that has participated and supported this activity in the project. I would like also to thank many of you in this call that I see as names that has been contributing and supporting us in the process of proofreading and really accepting these recommendations. I'm really happy that you share your expertise with this project and that we get to the point where we have some really harmonized regulations on the European level for this testing activities. So what's the next steps here? We will this deliverable, as mentioned, will be publicly available in July. And also that you can, of course, find this in the Connected Automated Driving Knowledge Base. The Q&As will be open if you have any additional questions. So you can use this if you have any questions. You can also connect directly to any of us in the FAME team, in myself at Chalmers or the IDIADA team or Austria Tech team for more information. But otherwise, these developments will be followed in the CCAM Ambassador project that starts more or less when the FAME project ends. So we have a continuation of these activities. So thanks a lot for this for the work and for that you joined this session today. Thanks to Artico team for organizing everything, and have a nice rest of the day. Thank you. Bye bye.